A bicycle and a monster created in a laboratory. Two things that should have absolutely nothing to do with each other. But they were both shaped by the same catastrophe, a volcanic eruption on the other side of the planet. In 1815, a mountain exploded in Indonesia. 1 year later, snow was falling in June. Crops were collapsing. Europe was starving. And without realizing it, the modern world was beginning to change. Mount Tambora, Indonesia, April 1815. For years, the mountain had been rumbling quietly, building pressure, waiting. Then on the evening of April 10th, it released everything. Three massive columns of fire shot into the sky and merged into one. Burning avalanches of gas, ash, and rock tore down the mountainside, erasing entire villages within seconds. The village of Tambora itself simply ceased to exist. The explosion was heard more than 2,000 kilometers away in Sumatra. British authorities mistook the distant thunder for cannon fire and sent soldiers searching for an invading army. There was none. Tsunamis struck nearby islands. When it was over, Tambora had lost more than 1,200 meters of its height. Where a mountain peak had once stood, a crater 4 miles wide remained. At least 71,000 people died. But the worst came afterward. Tambora had blasted enormous amounts of ash and sulfur into the atmosphere. And it wasn't coming down, it was spreading across the planet. And as it spread, it began blocking the sun. Europe and North America woke up expecting spring. It never came. Temperatures dropped across the northern hemisphere. Snow fell in June, then again in July. Farmers watched their crops freeze in the ground. The harvest failed. Food prices exploded. Bread became unaffordable for millions. Riots broke out across Europe as desperate crowds searched for food. In Paris, 1816 became the city's last great famine. Horses, still the foundation of transportation and trade, began starving too. Without food, they weakened, collapsed, and died. And the sky itself looked wrong. Volcanic dust high in the atmosphere scattered sunlight in strange ways, turning sunsets deep shades of red and purple. The light was beautiful. The reason for it was catastrophic. For millions of people, it must have felt like the world itself was breaking. They didn't know about the volcano. They didn't know why the summer had disappeared. They only knew they were cold, hungry, and afraid. And in the middle of that chaos, strange things began to happen. In 1816, transportation still depended almost entirely on horses. There were no cars, no trains, no alternative. But horses needed food, and food had disappeared. Across Europe, the animals powering entire economies were dying. In Germany, a forester and inventor named Karl Dreiss watched the crisis unfold and began asking a radical question. What if transportation no longer needed a horse? By 1817, he had built his answer, a two-wheeled wooden machine with no pedals. The rider pushed against the ground with their feet, gliding forward. Dreiss called it the Laufmaschine, the running machine. On June 12, 1817, he demonstrated it publicly in Mannheim, Germany, completing an 8-mile round trip in less than an hour. Many people thought it looked ridiculous. In England, it became known as the hobby horse, but the idea survived and evolved. Pedals, chains, gears, brakes. The bicycle on your street today traces its history back to a volcanic eruption in Indonesia. And that was only the first strange thing 1816 gave the world. Meanwhile, in Switzerland, a group of young writers had gathered near Lake Geneva for the summer. Among them was Mary Godwin, 18 years old, her lover Percy Shelley, and Lord Byron. They had come for sunshine. Instead, they found the year without a summer. The storms were relentless. Rain hammered the villa for days. Lightning split the sky above the lake. Trapped indoors, the group began telling ghost stories. Then Byron suggested each of them write one. Outside, the volcanic skies of 1816 churned above Lake Geneva. Inside, Mary Godwin had a waking nightmare. A scientist. A body assembled from the dead. A spark of electricity. Life where there should have been none. She began to write. The novel she created would become Frankenstein, one of the most influential stories ever written. A tale about science, creation, and humanity's dangerous desire to play God. A question that still feels modern, 2 centuries later. A volcano erupted in Indonesia in 1815. The skies darkened across the planet. Harvests failed. Millions suffered. Horses vanished from the roads of Europe. And in their absence, a new kind of machine began to appear. Meanwhile, inside a villa beside a storm-covered lake, young writers trapped indoors created a story that would survive for centuries. Frankenstein. The world was not ready for what Tambora did. It had no warning, no explanation, no way to prepare. And yet, out of famine, storms, and uncertainty, came ideas that outlived the disaster itself. 200 years later, most people have never heard of Mount Tambora, but they still live inside the world it helped create.